question about the laundry list, the other or opposite laundry list. And then we have the flip sides, which are the healing states of the laundry list. So the laundry list workbook in ACA does a very deep dive. It goes in very deep looking at the laundry list behaviors. And interestingly, I sort of think, so in the STEP workbook, have any of you done the yellow STEP workbook in ACA? Have you seen it before? So generally, they look at the laundry list behaviors in step 10 in the workbook, but I really think of looking at laundry list issues as more step 6 and 7, sort of right in alignment with what we might call character defects. It's really the results of the behavior of growing up in dysfunction. So I think of really the laundry list workbook and that sort of work is very intensive step 6 and 7 work. That's me personally. So in the workbook, they talk about, well, they give it a couple different names. They call it the game of dissociation. I don't think that's a particularly useful name, but they call it the game of dissociation. And it's based on what is called the Cartman Triangle or the Drama Triangle, or later known as the trauma with a T, trauma triangle. And basically it says there's three states in any sort of conflict dynamic or a trauma dynamic. And they're saying this is the expression of trauma. When people carry trauma, this is a triangulated interaction that happens by default. Okay, and it happens over and over and over again. Okay, and so what they're saying is there's 3 positions. They call it the PVR, or perpetrator, victim, rescuer. There's 3 roles in this dynamic: a perpetrator, or an aggressor, or a victimizer. All right, that's one position, and that one is associated with the other laundry list traits. Okay, in here, and then we have the victim side of the equation, which is more traditionally what we see as the ACA sort of state of being, the traditional laundry list. And it says we live life from the viewpoints of victims, right? So, and then the last one is rescuer. And the rescuer in the laundry list traits workbook, they say this is just a temporary position because eventually you're going to end up in victim or you're going to end up in perpetrator, one of the two. And so what's interesting is in the work that I've done for myself, I also tend to identify more on the victim side, but really, I really camped out a lot. I sort of found my role most often as rescuer. Okay, even though it's a temporary position, that's where I was most comfortable. So I was just focused on other people, taking care of other people. And the laundry list traits, the standard laundry list traits sort of is a combination of the victim position and the rescuer position. Okay, so that's the overview of the dynamic. The fallacy or the misleading assumption around this is that one position is better than the other, right? Like, don't be in the victim, we want to be in the perpetrator, or don't be in the perpetrator, you want to be in the rescuer, right? The goal is to step outside of the paradigm completely, right? We want to step out. We don't want to be in any 3 of those positions. We want to be in our true self, or we want to come from a place of love and compassion and healing, the flip sides of the laundry list, or the ACA promises and what that describes. But to be able to step out of that dynamic, we have to restructure our brains. We have to connect with our inner children. We have to be able to take off the filters that we put on as children, the blinders, the masks, the filters that we put on as children that only allow us to see these 3 positions as possibilities. And so ACA recovery for me is a process of learning to step outside of that dynamic, right? So historically, yes. And the last piece is most of us, we go from position to position. So it may be I am in the victim position, someone comes, rescues me, but then they don't rescue me, right? So I want to be aggressive with them. And then I step into more of a perpetrator victim position, right? So I call this, other people may call it, I call it a trauma dance, because really we're sort of dancing between these different positions. And if someone moves over to one position and I'm here, I might move to the next position. Or if a third person comes in, it may change the dynamics, right? So it's really living life from the viewpoint of being within this trauma triangle dynamic, and recovery is being able to step outside of that completely. How do we do that? We feel our feelings, we understand our wants and needs, we speak our truth, and we set boundaries in healthy, appropriate, direct, transparent ways, right? That's my sort of understanding. So yes, people who are sort of used to being in the victim place usually end up in relationships with people who are more aggressive. Even they say that's the last person I want to be with, right? That's who they say, but that's kind of who we end up with, right? So the other piece is on the rescuer place, the rescuer, because this is how a lot of relationships start, codependent relationships. At least one person is in the rescuer position, right?
Yeah.
So what this says is once you're in the rescuer position, you're going to end into, I'm going to rescue you, but then I'm going to expect that you rescue me in return, and I'll be in the victim position, right? And you'll be rescuer. Or I'm going to start in the rescuer position, but then you better do everything that I tell you to do, right? Right? Because this is for your own good, and I'm just here to help, and you better do it this way. And I end up from the rescuer position ending up into a more perpetrator position, right? So that's how these dynamics just sort of, and we just end up blindly doing this dance, and we call it relationship, we call it love, because we don't know any better, right? But when I become my own loving parent, I'm not looking for anyone to rescue me, and I'm not looking to rescue anyone else. I'm not going to be okay with someone being in an aggressive place with me, right? I'm not going to stand for that. It just won't work for me. And I will no longer be doing that dance. Now, of course, I still feel the tug. I'm in ACA 7, 8 years, whatever it is. And, you know, I have a new relationship, and it happens, but I can see it now. And I can be more conscious, and I can make choices, you know? So it's a constant, I get pulled in, and I kind of pull back a little bit, and I can kind of see what's happening. And I do things a little different, and then I kind of get pulled in again, because that's what I was raised with. And that's what we do. So I hope that gives you something to work with.